Salutare oameni buni, eu sunt Nicola, iar astăzi voi juca pentru prima dată KONA pe acest canal. Deci, în acest joc este vorba despre un detectiv pe nume Carl, în care descoperă niște lucruri foarte ciudate. Deci, dăm play și creăm un nou slot. În fine, acest joc este foarte interesant și e pe slabe. Deci ați înțeles. Suntem în octombrie, în anul 1970.
Carl Faubert sought information for a living. That is to say that ever since he returned from Korea, after having served with the armed forces, he had been working as a private investigator in Montreal. William Hamilton, a rich industrialist, had gotten in touch with him regarding a simple vandalism issue. Nothing to write home about. Not worth hiring a private eye either, just so he can drive for hours on rough roads. But that's how it had always been. The client pays, Carl gets it done.
Deci ne dă voie să conducem.
They had set up to meet at the general store, his client's business. Well, actually, the entire village had William Hamilton's name written all over it. When the roads were bad, muddy, or snowed in, it was customary around these parts to close them off, ignore those signs entirely, and drive there anyway.
Deci am scos acel Windows Activator. Nu o să vă mai apar pe ecran, adică mie nu o să mai apară și pe videoclip. Cred că o să fac și un tutorial cum să scoateți. Iar da, cam așa jocul se prezintă. Nu știu, este foarte interesant, este un pic horror.
Mentioned a road blocking barrier. Why was it needed here in the back of beyond? That would, however, be a mystery for another day. Carl had waited long enough for someone to come and raise it.
Deci ca să înțelegeți,
Hamilton is waiting for Carl in the general store. It was time for him to get down to business.
deci ca să înțelegeți acest.
Hamilton enjoyed a lavish country house built in the very
Ok, deci ca să înțelegi, această barieră se închide atunci când este o vreme rea, să zicem ninsoare, etc.
heart of the northern forests, not too far from here. The local populace was divided when it came to the affluent man. Some saw a wealthy philanthropist dedicated to improving the region's economy. Others an aging Englishman who would do anything to further his fortunes. And those ones hated him enough to go on about scheming against him. Hamilton had recently acquired a few local businesses, but the last straw was the reopening of a mine, which gave rise to a wave of protests and threats from the Cree people. Given these circumstances, Carl reckoned that a good number of people must be feeling compelled to oppose Hamilton in one way or another. So far, only the industrialist's house had been a target, but soon enough, Carl thought, the target would become the man himself.
Wow, accident. După mai multe ore. Sau după câteva ore. Bine.
Carl needed to get out of there. The cold and the pain required urgent care.
O pus în parc omul. KONA. Uite, mașina asta mai este aici.
The driver had taken off. It was still
Am
better to
fugit.
check it out and leave nothing to chance. Carl needed help. It was a small, locked box engraved with the letters W.H. Carl thought about taking it. Nothing was to be left to chance. This deep in the country, his last hope was to find an abandoned garage or a farm by the roadside. His life depended on it.
Salt anti-me-pick. What the fuck is this? It's also prevent Carl from freezing to death and save the game.
Even better than he had hoped, Carl Faubert had succeeded once more and was now on his way to new adventures.
Deci ăsta care vorbește acum, care vorbea, este naratorul. Iar Carl, despre care vorbește el, suntem noi, personaj principal.
Complaining was not in Carl's nature. It would take more than light injuries to interrupt his investigation.
A key is required to open this. When under stress, Carl is less accurate and runs shorter distance. Deci intrăm în mașină, o punem în reverse. Deci se vede că e automată. N-am mai pus un drive, omul meu. Bro, deci nu se vede nimic în față.
Spread out on
Manastan
the
region.
untouched forest, bellowing
Manastan.
caribou, everlasting snow, and undefiled lakes. The Manastan region was no tourist.
Manastan.
It was said to have been populated for millennia by Cree people, and ever since the industrial era, by the metal mining industry. The truck was running on fumes. Good thing that the general store was close by.
Deci da se încarcă ceva. Some Park, the general store.
The pumps wouldn't surrender their divine nectar so easily. In all likelihood, they had to be switched on from inside the store.
Deci trebuie să ne ducem înăuntru. Am luat cocaine, trebuiește.
Something fell to the bottom of the box.
Deci nu nimic. Oh shit.
Carl had no trouble recognizing his employer. He had been killed. There was no need to be a detective to figure that out. But only a detective could have noticed that the killer had to have been very close, that the fatal blow had been given before the victim even realized.
Ți-am făcut două fotografii. O să, pe inventar, cred că o să-mi trebuiască mai mult flashlight-ul.
Carl felt a chill down his spine and had a terrifying realization. If Hamilton was dead, then who was going to pay him?
Employ.
What could be inside that envelope? Carl was taken aback. He knew this address. It was said to be the address of the P.O. box for the Canadian Secret Service.
Turn it off. On. Ok. Deci pe aici nu e nimic. Sunt niște imagini. Uh, the place is a mess.
An explosion suddenly occurred outside.
S-a stins și lumina. Listen
Carl
from
knew that Gilles Lachance was in charge of the general store. That
Gilles.
made him one of Hamilton's employees. A very angry employee, as Carl could plainly see.
O avem first kit. O să trebuiască acum flashlight-ul ăla. La equipment flashlight. Uite-l.
Maintaining his composure, Carl
Da
recalled
niște lupi.
something from his military training. Wolves always stay away from populated areas. Wait, was it about bears? Carl was no electrician, but he could identify a wiring problem when he saw one.
Fit generator. Îmi trebuie și un duct tape și un farfece. Deci îți trebuie să ne ducem aici în garaj. Cred. Trebuie să avem nevoie de ok. Dar pe aici nu putem să intrăm. Nu știu, s-a închis. Draft letter. Let it know you're nothing more than a big and rob
Seems like
rocker
some
project.
villagers barely tolerated each other.
Și avem nevoie de ok. Cheia poate să fie înăuntru oare? Sau pe afară?
Carl was used to strange phenomena, but a chunk of ice like this, as if an iceberg came out of the ground, that was a first. Carl, ever diligent in his work, always carried his log on him, in which he scribbled down thoughts and leads alike during the course of his investigations.
Deci da, avem nevoie de cheia aia. Dar nu o găsesc.
A milkman had to drive by every week to fill the bottles. The fresh milk indicated a recent visit. A milkman had to drive by every week to fill the bottles. The fresh milk indicated a recent visit.
Iară, punem flashlight-ul. Trebuie să găsim acea cheie. Deci da. Deci oferă ca și un post office acest magazin.
A radiator without power is as good as a wood stove without logs.
Deci da, trebuie să ne uităm aici înăuntru să vedem dacă avem ceva. A broken clock. Trebuie să ne urcăm sus. Și rewind. Oh, cheia. Garaj key.
According to that log, it seemed like the whole
Duct
village
tape.
owed some money to the general store. Carl was far more interested in the bunch of nearby addresses he had just gotten his hands on, though.
Deci am găsit cheia de la garaj. Deci m-am dus să deschidem garajul. Mamă, deci e distrus tot pe aici. Trebuie să găsim acum farfecele ăla. Uite farfecele. Deci pe aici nu avem ce căuta. Și cam ce ne trebuie găsit. Cum ce putem să facem este să deschidem această ușiță și să ne ducem să reparăm fix generator. Generator. Turn off.
The pumps wouldn't surrender their divine nectar so easily. In all likelihood, they had to be switched on from inside the store.
Mesaj de stop, bă, dar ce-am făcut, mă? Un loc. Păi, inside the store. Deci l-am reparat, nu mai are nimic. This turn off from generator. Deci așa. Iar acum ar trebui să meargă. Uite așa. Așa.
Carl knew straight away where to find the infuriated Gilles Lachance. Any good investigation would have to start there.
Am pus-o în drive și am pornit.
Carl felt that the store and its surroundings still held their secrets, and he didn't like to miss out.
Rosiris House.
Oh, mon bonhomme!
What the fuck?
Ben là, l'étrange. Je m'attendais pas à ce qu'un étrange retentisse par ici.
What the fuck?
Prends plus de chance depuis que ça roule dans ce bout-là. J'ai ma carabine au bout du doigt, et puis bang, 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 si ça s'approche.
Ce restă măcar?
Vois que t'as pas mieux à faire.
Deci trebuie să găsim dovezi. Trebuie să găsim informații noi.
C'est le Wendigo. Ouais, le Wendigo. Un guerrier qui devient un loup pour se venger de sa compagne. Touche pas à ça, l'enfant. Tu pourrais te faire mal. Hé, la Corriveau, la tête. Ça te passe l'envie de te marier, la Corriveau. Elle tuait tous ses maris. Squick, les uns après les autres. Pas de pitié dans le mariage. C'est vrai, le jeune, que tu te promènes quasiment en popette. Une bonne police, ça te fait pas de tort. Mais je vais te dire une chose. Dans ton coin de pays, comme
Deci da, nu e nimic la asta.
il est où, mon caribou?
Am închis și muzica.
Gomme-moi la belle rose de la tulipe, qui se donne au yard sur le mercredi décembre. C'est-tu pas effrayant, ce
Deci în casa lui ăsta nu e nimic. Avem nevoie de o cheie. Deci da, o să ne ducem în altă casă.
There, Carl had fed his mind, but had forgotten the harsh reality that his body also needed nourishment, especially in the dead of winter.
Și acum pe unde o luăm? Tot în față la următoarea casă. Deci da, scopul nostru este să descoperim mai multe case până să dăm la casa lui Jonah, cum o cheamă. Sau cum o cheamă? Pocket. House of the Patriot. Ce nume House of the Patriot?
The place looked more like a pigsty than a house. A heavy stench of curdled milk, cheap alcohol, and boiled cauliflower filled the air. You had to be out of your mind to cook up white whiskey at home. The all-surrounding stench of alcohol alone was probably enough to gas a man to death. Jean Blouin. Seems like that pig had a name after all. Rock music invaded the minds of men even in the remotest of places. The man didn't own a turntable, though, so there's that going for him. Back then, in Africa and elsewhere, people were ready to take up arms to stand against the yoke of English imperialism. In Montreal, mailboxes were blown up, abductions were carried out, and violent manifestos were distributed to media outlets. But around here, in the great northernmost, all a man could do is curse out loud against a faraway evil and pray for the revolution to arise. That man, by any reckoning, was from that very stock. That truck had obviously seen its share of gravel roads. Carl wasn't a mechanic, but he could easily tell that only the most heartfelt prayer would bring this old beater back from its slumber. With that cold, however, it was more likely that it would wait until next spring to wake up. Carl felt that it was mission accomplished, with the wicked nectar in his hands. An axe, not too shabby. Carl felt he needed to protect himself. Garbage trucks rarely made a stop in the area. Thankfully, the lake served as a pretty good backup dump for those times when the bins started overflowing. With a homemade shooting range such as this, it wasn't hard to imagine a stray bullet ending its course inside the flesh of an unsuspecting passerby. Granted, Carl thought, there wasn't much in the way of passers-by around here.
Deci dacă am gata și cu casa asta. Deci da. Este prin apropiere. Deci deschidem gate-ul ăsta. What the fuck e?
The man seemed petrified in
What the
ice.
fuck?
What Carl saw terrified him, and he didn't know if it was the fear or the cold that was responsible for his hair standing on end all over his body. The poor man, before being frozen solid, seemed to be defending the entrance to his cabin. But from what?
What the fuck? What the fuck? Păi eu când v-am spus că e ciudat ceva la jocul ăsta, m-am cam
Something
speriat.
very important must have been in there for the man to take such time and effort to hide it. But Carl didn't know how to reach it. To all appearances, Carl concluded, the owner of the place had moved more essentials from his house inside the garage. Peculiar man indeed.
Deci da. Foarte ciudat. Extrem de ciudat. Deci da, cam asta a fost primul episod. Cred că o să fie încă vreo 2-3 episoade până o să terminăm acest joc. Vreau să duc până la final să aflăm toată povestea acestui joc.
It was so cold. Already Carl did not feel his toes anymore.
Mulțumesc că mi-ai spus. Deci da, dacă v-a plăcut acest videoclip, nu uitați să mă susțineți cu un like sau un subscribe. Iar eu vă urez o seară minunată în continuare. Pa, pa!